In this video, I'm going to show you how to shoot two completely different portraits using exactly the same lighting.
Adorama TV presents Take and Make Great Photography with Gavin Hoey, where you'll learn how to take stunning photos and then polish them in post-production. Here's your host, Gavin Hoey.
Take and Make Great Photos is brought to you by Adorama, your one-stop shop for all your photography needs.
Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching Adorama TV. Now, in this video, I'm going to do a self-portrait of, well, myself, obviously. Now, if you've never done one of these projects before, if you're learning portraits and learning lighting, a self-portrait project is a brilliant way to perfect your lighting and portrait skills. Now, I'm going to do two different portraits. One's going to be a really low-key, really dark portrait. And the other one, well, that's going to have a completely different background, and we're going to run it through Photoshop to create something rather different. Now, both of them are going to have one single speed light as the flash source. So I'm going to keep this really simple. In fact, I'm going to keep it so simple that the lighting is going to be identical for both pictures. In fact, the only thing that's going to change is the background itself. Okay, let's start talking about gear. First of all, I'm going to be using my Canon 60D for the shoot. And the 60D is a brilliant camera for a self-portrait project for two good reasons. Reason number one is the little pop-up flash that's on the top. This can be used to trigger the speed lights and control them. Nikon users, of course, you can do the same thing with many Nikon cameras using the CLS system. But the main reason I want to use this camera for a self-portrait is the flippy out screen at the back. That little flip out screen means that I can have the camera on live view. I can see exactly how I'm framing up my shot. My lens is my trusty Canon 24-105 that I use absolutely all the time, a brilliant lens. Of course, you're going to need a tripod, and I'm using my Vanguard Pro 263 tripod, which is a good sturdy tripod, and it has a nice little pistol grip head just to make life a little bit easier to line the shots up. Okay, I'm going to move this out the side because we're going to talk about backgrounds. Now, for my background, I'm going to be using this. This is a black background. I'll be using that for the low-key shot. But on the other side is a white background. And I'll be using this for the Photoshop cutout. But the reason I love this background and the reason I move my camera well out of the way is... Whoa, there we go. Yeah, it explodes open. And as you can see, it's a reasonably big size. Okay, it's not a huge size, but for what I need, a head and shoulder shot, this is the perfect sized background. Now, the reason I like to use these is because they are, well, flexible. You've got black and white. They are portable, which means that I can fold it back down really quickly and off we go. And they are affordable as well. You can get these on the Adorama store and they're not going to cost you an absolute fortune. But if you buy a really good one, it will last you for years. I've had this one for ages and it's showing its wear and tear, but it still works. Let's set everything up and we'll go through the shoot. Okay, so everything's now set up. I've got the background on its black side because we're going to do the low-key portrait first. And I've got my flash, it's a Canon 580 EX Mark II, and it's shooting into a silver reflective umbrella. You could use a softbox if you prefer, but it's best to avoid the shoot through umbrellas because for this shoot, I want to control the lighting and I don't want it to scatter everywhere as it does on a shoot through. Now, I've got everything in place, but I've got to actually focus the camera. How can you focus the camera when you can't reach the shutter button and there's no remote release? Well, you're going to need to do some work, and if you want to find out how to do this in more detail, check out the Adorama Learning site where Mark Wallace did a brilliant video. It's Digital Photography 101 episode 29, where he covered self-portraits in detail. Now I'm going to take his ideas and modify it a little bit, but one thing I do need to use is something to focus on. So this is it. This is my little focusing screen. Couldn't think of anything better to use, so this works just fine. And we'll drop this down. I've got it on a small boom arm and a little light stand here, and all I'm going to do is put it where I'm going to be, and then I'm going to focus on that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the camera into live view mode, and then I can frame up my shot like that, and I'm going to focus it up as well whilst we're here, so we'll get nice and sharp focus. And then I'm going to switch the focus from autofocus to manual focus. So now the focus is locked and I know it's going to be nice and sharp. I'm using an aperture of f11 for this as well to give me a really good depth of field, because although I focus it up, I still want a few inches of wiggle room just in case I don't get my face in exactly the right spot. I'm also going to use the self timer to trigger the image, and of course I'm going to flip the screen out so I can see what's going on. Okay, let's take the picture. Oh, before I forget, it also helps to pop up the flash. Okay, so self timer's running. Let's get into the shot, and we'll put my head where that needs to be, slide that out the way, frame myself up, here we go. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so just got it with moments to spare. And there you go, that is a great little picture, works extremely well in black and white, gives a very, very moody, low-key image. Right, so that is one picture in the bag. Now I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to change my pose, but I'm not going to change anything else. So I'm just going to walk up to the camera, get the self timer going, and go again. So let's just bring up my little hand, here we go. And we have a different picture again. I think for the third picture I'm going to do a bit more of a moody, menacing shot. I've got my hoodie on, so let's just put my hoodie on. There we go. I look ridiculous in a hoodie, but I'm sure it'll look okay in the photos. And we'll go and do that once again. Starting the self timer. Yep, I can see the self timer flashing. Frame myself up. Whew, 10 seconds, long time when you're waiting, but that gives it a great shot. Again, I can see how that's going to work really nicely as a powerful black and white, perhaps a little bit of clarity in there just to give that a bit of an edge as well. Okay, so that's 3 different pictures shot with the black background. Now I'm going to reverse it to the white background. I'm not going to change anything else because the white background should make life easier to cut out the background inside of Photoshop. Okay, so that's the white background in place, but nothing else has changed. Flash is still in the same place, camera's still in the same place. Although I may have kicked it slightly whilst I was moving things around. So I'm going to check the focusing. We'll bring alternative me back in and we'll kind of get him in the right place, like that. And then I'll focus up the camera. Okay, so self timer's going, into position, move alternative me out the way, look mean. Can't really do mean, I'm not very good at doing mean and moody, but that looks okay, that looks pretty good. So it's the same lighting as the Lowkey background, but of course with the white background I actually get more of a grey colour background, and that's going to make it so much easier to cut out inside of Photoshop and replace it with a background of my choosing. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do right now.
So I've brought the image through RAW and into Photoshop CS6, and the first thing I need to do really is just cut myself out from the background. And because the background's nice and plain and a very different colour to my hair, this should be fairly easy, particularly since Photoshop CS5, so CS5, CS6, and also Photoshop Elements 11, it now has a brand new feature that allows complex selections, like on hair, to be much easier. It's easier to show you than to explain it, so let's start by making a rough and ready selection around me. There we go. Now I say rough, but in fact this needs to be reasonably accurate because we're going to use something called Refine Edge, and the clue is in the name. We're going to refine the edge. That means we want an edge that's pretty good to start with, and then we're going to make it better for those little awkward hairs and bits and pieces that are hard to select with a tool like the quick selection tool or even the magic wand if that's your tool of choice for selections. So I'm just going around and seeing, have I missed anything large off? Because if I have, now's the time to get it. No, that's fine. Okay, so with the selection active, I'm going to click on the Refine Edge button, which you'll find at the top on the options bar. That brings up the Refine Edge here. Now, this is quite an advanced, complicated tool, but I'm not going to go into deep information about this. I'm just going to tell you the essential thing that you need to know. And it's all really here where it says edge detection. Now, if I increase the radius on my edge detection, well, let's go in close, actually. Let's go have a little closer look here at the hair, because that's really what we're interested in. Now, if I increase the radius, watch what happens to the hair when I let go. You see, I get more of the hair selected, and the more radius I put in, the more hair it finds. So you probably think, well, just bung it all the way to maximum. But watch what's happening as I go down here. Look, it's getting too much, and I need to bring the radius down. So the way to work this tool is to keep the radius reasonably low, and then paint in with this paintbrush areas that you want to add to that selection. So I want to add in bits of hair, for example, like that. And when I let go, it adds them in. And we're just going to run this paintbrush around the edge of my hairline. Now notice I say around the edge. I'm not going to go over the hair. I'm not going to paint across my head because those areas have already been selected. And if you go inside the hairline, it starts to really mess things up. So try and keep it on the outside and maybe just touch the edge of the hairline, but don't go in deep because you will get some odd effects. And we'll build this up. Round we go. And we'll come down the side. Yeah, there's a bit there as well. Okay, there we go. So there is all of my little fine hairs selected. It's done a really good job. One more thing to do before we finish here. Come down to the word output at the bottom and click the decontaminate colors. Now I do this every single time and it does two things. First of all, it makes it a slightly better cutout in my opinion. But also when you click OK, by default you end up with a layer mask, and that just gives you an extra level of control on the final effect. Okay, so all I need to do now is to grab my move tool, and I can drag myself off of that picture onto the tab with my new background, bring it down, let go, and I'll appear on the other background. Now clearly I'm a little bit too big for this, so let's go to Edit, use a bit of Free Transform, and we'll shrink myself down, just holding Shift so it all stays proportional. Yeah, that looks good. I'll click on the tick. Right, so I'm now on the new background, but I've got myself as a colour image here because that made it easier to cut out. There's more information for Photoshop to select. Now what I want to do is turn it into a black and white portrait. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and Black and White. Now I can change a few things like the blues, because I'm wearing a blue jacket. I can change the tonal value of that jacket, so let's go fairly dark. And the yellows and reds will affect my skin tone, so I can increase or decrease my skin tone. Quite like that down there. If I want to go more edgy, I can bring the reds down. That gives me more of a suntan look. That's not quite what I'm after, I don't think. I think around about there looks good. That gives a sort of darkness to the skin, but it still has a good range of tones. Now I could stop there, but just as an extra little feature, I'm going to put a small shadow in behind me. And the way I'm going to do it is to go to Layer and duplicate the layer. I'm going to switch off the top layer and click on the middle layer, so that's now active. And that layer is going to be my shadow because it needs to appear behind me, so I'm using the layer below the main picture. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go up to Layer, and we're going to apply that layer mask. So let's go down to Layer Mask and Apply. And effectively that cuts me out. That makes that layer mask a permanent feature, and that's important to do for the effect that I'm after. Then we can go out to Image, Adjustment, and Levels. And on the levels, I'm going to take the histogram and I'm going to move the black slider way over to the right-hand side. And I get this sort of silhouette. Who is this man of mystery? This silhouetted, but it's me. It's a self-portrait. Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and we'll put plenty of Gaussian blur in here. Let's take it up to 100. There you go. Now I can turn on that top layer, and I can move with the move tool that shadow, and I can put it anywhere I want. So probably around about there looks good. And then I'll just drop the opacity down to about 50%, somewhere in that area, just so it has a hint of a shadow in there. Yeah, there we go. That looks about right. And it just gives a bit of an edge to the background. So there you go, two different portraits, one done in Photoshop and one Lowkey picture like this.
Well, hopefully you found this video helpful and informative. And if you did, don't forget to click on the subscribe button. I'm Gavin Hoey for Adorama TV. Thanks for watching.
Take and Make Great Photos is brought to you by Adorama, the place for everything photography.
Adorama TV is brought to you by Adorama, your best source for the equipment and knowledge you need. For all the latest photography, video, and computer gear, visit Adorama.com. Place your order by 7 p.m. and it ships the same day. Plus, the next time you're in New York City, Be sure to visit our store, located on 18th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. Check out the Adorama Rental Company for professional cameras, lighting, computers, and more. We'll help you make the best selection to match your needs while giving you the knowledge to achieve the best outcome from your rental. Adorama is your complete solution for equipment, printing, training, and more. Adorama, more than a camera store.